So here's a paper that I would invite all of you to take a look at. It's actually mostly written in English, despite the fact that it has a bunch of propeller heads. Ecologists and fisheries biologists, lawyers, economists, and anthropologists who wrote it, okay? But the important point is that this paper, I think, more than any I've seen, diagnoses the problem. And what's the problem? The problem is the reason our oceans are in real trouble is because the way we govern ourselves doesn't work for protecting and sustaining the values of the things we care about in the ocean. Decision-making is fragmented. The spatial scale for decision-making and ocean processes is different. The temporal scale for nature and oceans is different. And there are gaps, there are overlaps. It's a mess. I think we need to do it a different way. I think we need a paradigm shift. And the paradigm shift would be ecosystem-based planning and management using zoning. So this sets off an idea. If the problem is spatial, then the solution has to be spatial, right? You can't solve the problem by thinking in ways that are different from the structure of the problem. And so what is ecosystem-based spatial planning? Well, the great thing about it is that it gives you two things. One is it addresses the fact that the oceans aren't uniform. They're heterogeneous. There are things in one place that are different from things in another place, and it captures the sense of place in the ocean, just as all of you fully understand the sense of place on land. And the other thing it does is it separates incompatible uses. That's really, really important, because there are things that we do that are compatible with one another, and there are things that aren't compatible. And I want to give you some examples. Can we do the next? There we go. First of all, some really, really important things happen only in certain places. Anybody who spent any time in the ocean knows that the oceans aren't uniform, that this is true. And here's another thing that's true. There are some human uses that are incompatible with one another. And I use the example of parasailing and wind farms. The wind farm people hate wiping off that pink goo off the blades all the time, okay? And you can think of other examples, I'm sure, like pots and trawlers and things like that. But there are lots of examples of things that aren't compatible, and we have to understand what is and what isn't spatially. And I think the important thing here is that we have to look for win-win solutions. We have to have that idea as an integral part of our planning. And this is how you do it, as far as I can tell. Basic principles, okay? First, you need to know what the geography of the places is. You have to create a map of the places. And there needs to be one managing authority for every place on the map. That doesn't mean that you can have a lot of places on the map with the same managing authority, but every place you are, every square inch, needs to have one managing authority. It can be an individual. I'm the ocean czar. It can be a committee. It can be an agency. In different places, there can be different solutions. But you can't have 20 different authorities managing the same place and ignoring each other. It doesn't work. You have to protect and recover biodiversity. That's bottom line stuff. As a friend of mine would say, no fish, no fisheries. Simple as that. Okay? You have to eliminate the uses that are unsustainable, or at least reduce their footprint to places that you're willing to write off. And that's a societal decision. There are free fire zones, sacrifice zones that we may have to consider. You have to separate the incompatible uses. You have to use the best information we can get. You have to reach out to the general public. Here's a big one, and you're going to be spending a lot of time on it tomorrow. You have to make the planning open, inclusive, and accountable. The people who are making the decisions have to really, really listen. Listen. Listening is good. And then you have to do adaptive management. When you learn new things, you got to be able to change what you're doing, right? And so how do you start? I think you need a legal mandate and you need money, okay? I heard today that when money is available, things can move forward. Even if you have the legal mandate, if there's no money, it doesn't move forward. You need to have the map of geography. You have to get lots of public input. That's what we're here for. That's what we're talking about. You have to have a zoning system that works. You have to zone each bioregion based on what you know about the natural science, where the living things happen, where the physical things happen, and the social science, where the people happen, and give them one governing authority for each place. And here's an example of a system I've come up with based on my conversations with a buddy from Australia. He says this is the simplest one. He calls me simple. He says this is the simplest one he thinks will work. There are only 4 basic kinds of zones. There's one where you don't go, because the things in them are so sensitive that human presence is too disturbing. You know, like seabird nesting colonies and such. That's a tiny, 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 tiny fraction of the whole. The other 3 kinds of zones are the big ones. One is marine reserves that don't allow extractive and other degrading uses. One is buffer zones that allow extraction if it doesn't destroy habitat. And one of them is general use zones, where anything that's legal and politically acceptable that can get permitted can happen. So the economy can move forward, but it moves forward in a place-appropriate way. Australia's done it. Australia's done it. They have taken the entire Great Barrier Reef Marine Park and they've zoned it. And they've zoned it so that some of the areas are general use areas and allow trawling. Some of them are fully protected marine reserves and don't allow any extractive uses. Some of them are in between those two. They're called conservation zones, where they protect habitat. They got it right, and they followed these steps. And I'm shameless about stealing from what these folks have done. And a lot of it appears in this issue of marine policy. And this is a good read. This is a good read. My friends Fanny Duveret and Bud Ehler at UNESCO in Paris put this special issue together. I've got a paper with my buddy Larry Crowder, and there are other papers as well in here that look at the biological and sociological dimensions of marine spatial planning. For PNCIMA, this is a great jumping off point. Now, I've been doing this for 30 years. We all got our start at the same time. What's that about, Gordon? Anyway, in the beginning, every new idea seems nuts, and it's ridiculed by people who really, really, really want to hold on to the old way of doing things, whatever it is. And then they get up in arms and they try to undermine it in any way possible. And then the next stage is everybody says, oh, everybody knows that, okay? And that's what's happening here. We are going from the first stages, and we're already seeing signs of the third. And it's happening in more and more countries, and it seems to be happening first here in northern BC, or I shouldn't say here, but in northern BC, which is our subject of concern today. And I believe that we can do this. This woman used to live in my building in Washington, D.C. She was the chief computer person for the U.S. Navy for many years. And Grace really had it right when she said, we can do it differently. We can change if we want. We can invent a process that replaces the one we have that has failed us, that was appropriate for the world we were living in, but is no longer serving our needs. And my crew of 20 is dedicated to doing this. This is our meat and potatoes. It's the most important thing we're working on. And we only have one Canadian on our gang, the first guy, Jeff Ardron, but we are very much interested in this process in the United States, in Canada, wherever it is happening around the world. We want to learn the lessons. We want to help our country and other countries do it right. And if you want to read more about it, I welcome you coming to our website. Take a look. There are papers there. We're writing actively. There are going to be more. Every time I meet people like you, I steal new things. And I want to say thank you very much.